I wouldn't call Selena a villain. There's just so much in the gray.
You're pretty good at that.
That their idea of what justice is might be a little bit different.
Who are you under there? What are you hiding?
There was no question in my mind that Zoe was going to be a great Selena Kyle. I could feel that this is a character that she felt a connection to.
You got a lot of cats.
I have a thing about strays.
He really struggles to think, you are on the bad side, that I like you.
I really felt for her, her story, her past, her strength. I really found a character who was more than just a sidekick or more than just a good-looking girl in a tight outfit. She's a survivor.
Who is she? No idea.
The bat and the cat. It's got a nice ring.
She really wants to fight for those who don't have someone else to fight for them.
These two characters, they relate to each other, and she's this mirror image of him, and yet they're so damaged in their own way.
If we don't stand up, no one will.
They're both people who aren't afraid to die for what they believe in. And I think that is where Batman and her really connect.
It's only gonna get worse for you. It'll be bloody.
I know.
I think she's ready to raise some hell.
Selena, don't throw your life away.
Don't worry, honey. I got 9 of
them. Obviously, you could do a lot with CG, and everything could be kind of a green screen movie. What we're trying to do, and what I've always found takes something and makes it extra special, is to take something and have as much real as possible in the frame.
How do you invent Gotham for real? How do you prep Gotham for real? And that led us to improving our technology. The city of Gotham is a character in the movie. And so you're like, how do we do this for real? And if you want to do it with the best quality to make it look real, you want to avoid anything that looks like, bad visual effects shots.
We're using the LED volume. We're trying to do as much in camera as possible. Now that's still using new technologies, but the goal is to create as photoreal an experience as we can. So Greg Fraser is lighting with practicals. The light in the set is coming from the set itself, by and large. It's a huge movie, so there's big extension.
Having done this before on another show, I saw the power of this very early on, and it's a positive for the final viewer when something is shot in camera. By pushing the technology along on Batman, Warner Brothers is going to make it more accessible to the next DP that does the next show. This is one of those things that has to be done this way, because you can't go back in terms of progress when you've seen something perform as well as it can. To move backwards onto a traditional blue screen stage feels to me like it's not doing justice to the Batman.
That's one of the big advantages with the LED stages. You can essentially freeze time. You can put up a golden hour sunset, and you can have that sunset last as long as you need while you're doing the photography. When you're shooting, out on location, you'll shoot a bunch of stuff one direction at sunrise, and you shoot a bunch of stuff the other direction at sunset, just so that the lighting is better on the actors' faces depending on which direction they're facing. With the LED setup, you can essentially spin the world, you can spin the sky, hold the world stationary.
So we're making a lot of advancements in terms of how robust we can make this technology. Having these panels work in the rain is only possible by pushing that envelope, and that's certainly something that we've been in terms of how robust we can make this technology. Having these panels work in the rain is only possible by pushing that envelope, and that's certainly something that we've been excited to be a part of.
It was exciting to work in the volume because you feel like you're at the forefront of something. The volume work that had been done had been in desertscapes, not in cityscapes. And so the idea of virtually creating a city and James working hard with the artists to try and lay out this city in a way that felt really signature to us.
It was an opportunity to see Gotham, the animal that is this city, the character that is this city, perform for us.
Gordon! Help me out, man!
Shut up!
Not that way.
There is no other way. He owns the city.
Me and Rob had this emotional scene on a roof, and to really have the cityscape, it was a game changer. It was incredible what they were able to do.
All of that stuff took months and months of planning inside a computer or game space before we started building.
It allows us to make the the entirety of the set more real, makes the lighting more real, makes the photography ultimately look more real. In addition to the benefit that it gives us from a technical standpoint, you've also got the rest of the environment there, so the actors can experience the space. As they're driving the cars, they can react to what's coming at them on the screens.
I got you! I got you!
There's always this argument with people who are into Batman where it's his real self, Batman, or Bruce Wayne. And I was always kind of interested in that.
I think that the Batman is psychologically and emotionally interesting. It's so much about the shadow self, which we all have.
Things about alter ego and identity and stuff. He believes in it so much. He believes it kind of elevates him as a creature. It is transformative to Bruce.
And I think it's actually his humanness in a world of superhumans that makes us all want to connect with him and explore him.
If the Batman's vengeance, what do you think the Riddler is?
Justice. Yeah, justice. A lot of it is about what's unfair, what feels fair and what's been unfair, and it's not fair that the corrupt are getting richer while we're suffering, you know. And it's justice, vengeance and justice, I think. Yeah.
You're not supposed to reject the Riddler outright. The Riddler's the Riddler because of a lot of horrible things that have happened prior to that.
When I was writing and thinking of this character in a way that felt like the Zodiac, that felt like a serial killer, what was important was that the Riddler is someone whose great power has to do with patterns.
The Riddler is a person who's done, who's fed up, and who I don't think can go another day letting Gotham City cycle through its corrupt roots again and again. I think he's probably blamed himself for all of the failings of his life. And I think once he discovered this corruption, he sees that maybe it wasn't all his fault. It's theirs.
Okay, then he goes off to your right. He has a very dark agenda, but he's also kind of brilliant. And he retreated the way that Batman retreats into his mission of becoming a vigilante. Comes back, passes. He retreats into numbers and agenda, but he's also kind of brilliant. And he retreated the way that Batman retreats into his mission of becoming a vigilante. Comes back, passes. He retreats into numbers and puzzles. Goes far to your left so we can see. Because it's the one place where he can find control. Great. Exactly. The hood was okay, let's go through the whole thing again. Something about that made me think of Paul.
One of the first things that we talked about was like the two sides of trauma. And that really spoke to me.
The first conversation I had with Matt about it, I just knew he just had an angle on something. There was something about doing it as a noir. I mean, even though Batman is always kind of a noir, but like it's never just fully committing to that world.
The hell is this? Good cop, bad shit cop? Who's the Riddler? Riddler! How should I know?
Having the emotional backstory be the driving force for that character felt, good to me. The root of it is in the child. And what does it mean to be an orphan? You have a kid named Bruce Wayne who loses his parents, but ends up trying to do something good with that pain. And then you have the trauma of somebody who's lost his parents in a different way and who takes that pain and probably thinks he's doing something good, but it is maybe misguided or misdirected.
Normally, Batman seems to hold all the strings. The plan is entirely his, but really in this, he's still trying to figure out exactly what Batman is. And the Riddler seems to know secrets about Batman and Bruce that even Bruce didn't know. It's a very reactive version of Batman that I don't think we usually get.
And everybody just forgot about us. All they could talk about was poor Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne the orphan. Orphan? I think seeing the Batman was probably one of those. Bruce Wayne the orphan. Orphan? I think seeing the Batman was probably one of those transcendent moments in his life, an aha moment where you project something onto that figure out there and you see some hidden piece of yourself or something that you want to be. Without the Batman, you know, you would never have the Riddler.
What I wanted to do was have the Riddler lead us on a path where there are lots of possibilities. When they meet at Arkham, that's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and I love the way that Paul and Rob played that scene.
I told you I'd see you in hell. The Riddler doesn't just need Batman as inspiration. He needs him in a practical way too, because he does know his limitations. The Batman's style of combat is pretty fierce. That's not in Edward's wheelhouse.
My strength is up here. I mean, I had all the pieces, I had the answers, but I didn't know how to make them listen. You gave me that.
I gave you nothing.
You showed me what was possible.
I think it's more similar than Bruce would like to really admit. I think that's why it's extremely troubling for him by the end of it, because the only difference in a lot of ways is that the Riddler follows through and his justice is fatal.
Jesus, his next victim is Bruce Wayne.
Bruce Wayne. I think the connection is not just in the vigilante element or the political element. I think it's emotional.
It's almost a love story. In the course of that scene, it ends up being a terrible rejection for the Riddler because he's certain that he'll be embraced because they're both vigilantes. They're both righteous. They're both trying to go after the criminal element. And the Riddler is doing that, but he's doing it in the most twisted way. And he obviously has crossed a line that vigilantes. They're both righteous. They're both trying to go after the criminal element. And the Riddler is doing that, but he's doing it in the most twisted way. And he obviously has crossed a line that Batman wants to think he would never cross and is doing everything he can not to.
You showed me all it takes is fear and a little focused violence. You inspired me.
The Riddler calls that out in him. There's a lot of signs that Bruce wants to kill people. He even fears that in himself, but he wants to end up punishing the Riddler because it's, you know, he's being a mirror to Bruce's secrets.
You're out of your goddamn mind.
What?
When the Batman doesn't reciprocate as planned, it's heartbreaking. It's betrayal. I think he thought he had a friend.
No amount of pain and damage you inflict on people who have wronged you or wronged someone else, it's not gonna fix the situation, basically. That's basically the arc of Batman in this.
The thing that is so great about Batman, historically, culturally, and in this film, it's that space in between, which is where we really all live. That's so potent and powerful and true. I think it is about having heroes and having villains and exploring the space in between.
I was approached while I was in post-production for War for the Planet of the Apes. And when I was first contacted by Warner Brothers, I didn't understand what the meeting was for. So I kept turning it down. And then finally my agent called me one day and he said, listen, that general meeting with Warner Brothers, it's not a general meeting. It's about Batman.
I was just starting Christopher Nolan's movie, Tenet. And then 2 days later, we'd had to come back to do the Batman screen test. Yeah, it was like a super high-pressure scenario.
You know, auditions are always, they're strange and they're scary and you're nervous. They have a proper camera, but it's cool because you kind of get a taste of what it will really be like on set. Yeah, they gave me a motorcycle helmet and I had to take the helmet off, which was my biggest fear, was like, I'm gonna get stuck with the helmet. And I was like, that's how I lose this job. But Rob was half in a bat suit. It was like this kind of like in-between world. Like we were almost there, but not quite.
I mean, the whole thing is terrifying. I mean, I was putting on the suit from Batman Forever, and for one thing, the suit is pretty old. It's been in storage for a while. It's also incredibly precious. If I even slightly exert myself, I'm pouring sweat. And also just trying to figure out how to project a performance through a mask, basically. It's kind of, you realize pretty quickly that this is way harder than a normal part.
One of the things that distinguishes Batman as a comic superhero relative to most of the others is Gotham. That's very recognizable, obviously styled off largely New York. And so he's grounded in a way that's kind of uniquely relatable.
Matt was very, very clear saying he wanted to make this is a detective story, that right from the beginning. And so you think, okay, so he's the greatest detective in the world. What makes a good detective? Someone who just is exceptionally observant.
I always think of filmmaking as a kind of, you're going on a search, and you're searching for the things that stick with you. On this movie, what started the process was I just started reading comic books. I went back to 1939, I just basically did a deep dive in the comics, and anything connected, I just wrote down. Basically, what the notebook is for me is a way to have a dialogue with myself, because otherwise I would just be saying these things and then I wouldn't remember anything. But if I write it down and then I keep revisiting it, I start having a kind of document that shows what I'm interested in and what things, sort of struck a chord with me, and eventually a story starts to emerge. I gave Bruce a notebook as well because I felt that he needed to have that kind of dialogue with himself. And I thought, wow, this is so Batman.
Matt gave us a sort of idea that he'd like him to be a bit like Kurt Cobain. So from that, I looked at lots of different images of Kurt Cobain and what the crossover was, who he becomes when he takes his cowl off. And the whole Kurt Cobain black eye makeup sort of really struck me, and I liked the idea that he had the remains of his Batman makeup on, and it looked very rock and roll.
He spends a lot of time in darkness. That long hair really helped with creating that side of his character. At one stage, we were talking about shaving all his hair off, and I'm glad we didn't go down that road.
There's a film by Gus Van Sant called Last Days, which is kind of a fictionalized account of the last days of Kurt Cobain, and he's got all his stuff spread all over it. And I thought, well, this is the version of Batman and Bruce Wayne that I understand.
I knew where he was coming from in this kind of slightly nihilistic...
You know who I am? You're Bruce Wayne. I want to see Carmen.
That I understand.
I knew where he was coming from in this kind of slightly nihilistic...
You know who I am? You're Bruce Wayne. I want to see Carmine Falcone.
There's something more emotional, and doesn't necessarily know that he's going to save the day. He doesn't know if being Batman is going to work or do anything. He knows that there is no other option. Basically, the options are kind of death or being Batman.
This is the 5th movie that Michael Giacchino and I have done. That, to me, is a very exciting collaboration. I love working with him. The night before Rob was to screen test, he sent me a secret little MP4. It was both Bruce's theme and Batman's theme in this incredible suite. And I was blown away. It was so emotional. I drove to the set that morning, and Dylan Clark, my producing partner who was in this from the beginning with me, we're like brothers. I said, you have to get in the car. He said, what do you mean? So just get in the car.
And we sat in his car. I was in his passenger seat, and I didn't know what I was going to listen to. He goes, listen to this. And he pressed play, and, it's Batman's theme.
I played it as Rob was putting that makeup on his eyes, and I was like, this is in the movie. We're doing this. That's where that scene comes from. It literally came out of Rob's audition. Okay, good, cut. It was one of those things where I just felt like this was a very special, fated day. But there we were listening to the music, knowing that he was going to put on this bat suit that was part of the history of Batman. It was just one of these things where you suddenly felt you were in a long line of history that meant so much.
They think I'm hiding in the shadows, but I am the shadows.
For some reason, Batman just always stood out. Bruce doesn't know if being Batman is going to work or do anything. He's just compelled to do it.
The hell are you supposed to be?
I've loved Batman since I was a kid. It's one of those stories that allows you to find a personal avenue into something. He's a very human character.
There's always this argument with people who are into Batman where people are always asking, is the real Bruce Wayne, is his real self Batman or Bruce? He's just not so cleanly heroic. I find that really fun to try and find just a new way of doing something when, you know, a lot of your heroes have played it before.
The killer left this with the Batman. Why is he writing to you?
It's more about the psychological investigation of what it is to be capable of good and to be capable of darkness.
I can't have an effect. I don't care what happens to me.
Boy, hear everything they say.
The mask separates Bruce Wayne and Batman in a stark way. There's something about Robert's face that creates a magic.
You got a lot of cats.
I have a thing about strays.
When you see him in the batsuit silhouetted, his jawline and everything, he looks like the comic. It's pretty crazy.
Who are you under there? What are you hiding?